Lex Bell, Lexbell. I'm the Chief of Police for the Moab City Police Department. Today we are going to talk about a cold case that has been in this community for 51 years that has gone unsolved. And it's an emotional day for a lot of people in this room, so you'll understand as we go through at least our portion of what we want to present and how we want to speak about it. But I wanted to lay kind of some quick groundwork, or at least some background on this. On Friday, March 2nd, 1973, Ann Woodward found herself alone at the bar with an unknown male. That man would end up robbing her, assaulting her, and brutally murdering her by strangling her with the leg of her own pants. Ironically, 51 years later, that pair of pants is what led us to her killer. I'm going to quickly turn time over to our detective, Jeremy Drexler. He took the initiative when he came here. I myself just started with Moab Police Department 2 years ago as the assistant, and now I'm the chief. We've been recruiting talent and people with a lot of experience for this police department. We've done a great job with that. Detective Drexler is now a standing detective, and he's done an amazing job with this. No one assigned this to him. He saw that it was not solved, and he said, this needs to be solved, and I'm going to solve it. So I want to give him a lot of credit for that. Sheriff's Office has also been an integral part of where we are today. Without them, clearly we wouldn't be here as well. Detective Drexler is going to go through a few slides to show you how we got from 1973 to today, and he will let everyone know during his presentation who we have now learned was the killer of Ann Woodward. Detective Drexler.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. I'm going to start out stating by it certainly wasn't only me. It was the leadership we have now, the leadership we have at the Sheriff's Department. It was a collaborative effort of all of us working together. I will admit I'm a driving force, and I was not going to stop until I figured it out, and we figured it out all together. So on March 1st, 1973, Ann Woodward, owner and bartender of Woody's, left for work and she came home that night. Ann was a devout Catholic and a member and a mother of 4 children when she was murdered in her bar at closing time. A bar patron that frequented Woody's bar, he worked at the Rio Alga mine and would frequent her bar. He was one of the plus 30 suspects at the time that they interviewed and went after, if you will, in 1973. Today, after 51 years, 2 months and 19 days of this crime going quiet in the city of Moab, I can now announce who is responsible for Ann's murder in the early morning hours of March 2nd. This person is Douglas Keith Chodamalka. He was approximately 35 years old when he took Ann from her husband, her children, and the community of Moab. Douglas Keith Chodamalka was born February 7th, 1937 in Nebraska. He also died in Nebraska in October of 2002. He had a criminal history that expanded several states in several decades. If he was alive today, I would be asking Grand County District Attorney Steve Stocks for an arrest warrant for Douglas K. Chodamalka for the crime of first-degree murder for his actions on March 2nd, 1973. I have several PowerPoint slide here that I can go through, and it describes the DNA process and how we found him, how we found the DNA, as well as the case as a whole when it started from 73 until it ends here today. I want to extend my condolences to the Woodward family and hope today's announcement kind of provides some small measure of solace and closure from 1973. The DPS's website had Ann's case up, as well as a lot of newspapers had done a lot of background on it in 1973. That is one of the crime scene photos from the exterior back in 1973. These are the 2 main gentlemen that obviously did the investigation, the Sheriff Bowman and Chief Melvin Dalton. The exterior of Woody's at the time, another exterior shot of Woody's at the time from 1973. The interior of Woody's in 1973. You have to remember this is 1973. None of these agencies at the time had any type of cameras. Nobody had a camera. They actually had to ask the news media to come and take photos. So it was an interesting time for that. Ann was sitting at the bar at one point or another with another person. That person was unknown. We were able to determine that Ann was sitting where the green was, and the red circle that you see there was somebody that was sitting next to her. Now, this person that was sitting next to her in the red, we had no idea whether or not if he was the one that committed the crime, because the crime that gets committed is around 25 feet away. 29 items were collected at the scene by the sheriff's department at the time. Every single item that you see here had been sent to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Every item had been sent to the FBI. Both agencies worked pretty diligently trying to figure out who it was. They took some hair samples from many suspects. They honed in on Doug pretty early on as well. They took hair from Doug and sent that hair and fibers in to try to match it with hair and fibers that were at the crime scene. They also took Doug's fingerprints at the time to try to match it against the glass that I just showed there as well. It's to note that Melvin Dalton would later on in interviews state that he felt that if he had a homicide detective, he'd be better off. He felt that he didn't do enough for the case. And Melvin had such forward thinking that on the sheet on the right, he wanted to match Doug's blood type with the way a cigarette was smoked and taking the filter and sending it to the FBI to match the blood type. The FBI sent the cigarettes back and basically stated, this is too much forward thinking. We can't do that. We can't match a blood type with a cigarette. Those cigarettes then come back to us. Those cigarettes stay in the same carton when they were sent back from 73 FBI in the same box. No one had touched them since FBI sent them back when I found them. Many latent prints were taken from the scene. The main glass that the suspect may have drank from, none of the fingerprints matched any of the suspects. And back in 1973, we didn't have what we have today, digital fingerprints, other things that we can utilize and help us out. They really went after the fingerprints on whoever was sitting next to Ann to figure out who killed her. None of the fingerprints matched. I've had cases in the past as well where I've had fingerprints that haven't matched and I've had to go a different way of it. So they kind of started doing a different way of it and started doing polygraphs as well. The case he's on early up, obviously they do polys and all that. However, lots of evidence is sent in. A lot of the suspects, 3 or 4 of them, according to the notes that I read, got attorneys and no longer wanted to talk. So at that point, the case goes quiet. You're going to see in there that I name it quiet. Obviously, it's listed on DPS website as a cold case, but I renamed it the quiet case after I took it and started walking around and speaking to people with it. There were a lot of people that wanted to talk about it. So the cold to me gives the connotation that it was forgotten, and it was absolutely, Ann was not forgotten at all. It was not forgotten. It was just quiet. Just got to ask the right questions. In 2006, Police Chief Mike Navarre officially opens it up. I utilize Mike a lot in this. Mike is with us here today. Mike was my historian on this case. There were many a time stopping at Mike's house, sitting at his kitchen table, and just talking back and forth. Mike, I know, wanted to solve this very, very badly before he left the police department. Mike paved the path for me as well, actually paved the path for us, for our agencies to solve this with some of the notes that he had, his historian views on it. He opens up the case in 2006. He technically started working on it in 88, he says, because it never went away. He's given playing cards that are there. He's also given a couple glasses. And at the time, Mike believes that the glasses are from the suspect and the victim. However, later on, I find out that the glasses that he gets were not from the bar. They were actually taken from the sink, and they were extras that were there that were given to him. The DNA comes back inconclusive on the glasses that he had sent in back then when he did the investigation from 06 to 2011. 2 months after I arrived in Moab, I was hired as a detective here. I kind of start running with it, start looking at the case. The case jacket was quite thick. It's handwritten notes. 1973, there's no records management system. I just can't go to the computer and say, hey, this evidence is here. Hey, this note here. This is a written statement here. But a couple of dates that I wanted everybody to learn here is in January of 2023, there's an FBI analyst in the FBI lab. Her name is Nicole. She found 15 of the fingerprints from 1973 in the FBI archive in Virginia. These fingerprints had never entered APHIS before. So I immediately wrote up a letter having these fingerprints entered to APHIS to do the automatic fingerprint system, which was created by the FBI in 1999. September 14, 2023, we find 2 boxes of evidence in the back corner of the evidence room in the Sheriff's Department where all their older cases are. In October 13th, we find additional OME photos, which greatly help us out as well. And then November 1st, the evidence goes to the crime lab, and then May 21st, we get the DNA results. So January 20th, the fingerprints are found. There's 15 unknown fingerprints out of the 15 that I was told from the FBI lab. 13 of them were viable, and viable means that they could be placed into the APHIS system for matches. They had never been seen the light of day until 1973. Those fingerprints are entered in. All of the fingerprints come back inconclusive again at that point through APHIS. On September 14th, 2023, myself and Investigator Whitney with the Sheriff's Department go over to the storage area of the Sheriff's Department, and at that time, in the back corner where some of their old case files are and their old cases are, we locate 2 boxes, and inside those boxes are all of the evidence that was collected back in 1973. Everything that you see there at one point or another had gone to the FBI lab and had come back. A couple of those pieces of evidence had actually gone over to like Dallas lab, and it had actually gone over to the state of Utah lab, and everything came back in those 2 boxes and was kept there like it should have been with the Sheriff's Department. Inside, obviously, is the clothing that Ann wore that night when she went to her work. When you're looking at this photo, you can see that she had Kleenex in each pocket. However, in her pants pocket, in the left pocket, there's a Kleenex missing. And in one of the crime scene photos, the Kleenex is actually out on the floor. So when we get this evidence, I now know that the suspect had robbed her. He had put his hand in her pocket and took out her money that she won that night from playing poker. And when he did that, he had a Kleenex from her pocket and discarded it on the floor. That's why I have a missing Kleenex there. A lot of the other evidence that was obtained, everything from 1973. You have to understand, I was born in 1977, so this is 4 years previous to this. So this is really going into a time machine. When we found this, it was a moment where you sit back and you watch what you're doing, because this is it. This is where we find out who did this. A lot of hair samples were there, fingernail scrapings, everything that was there that would have been collected back then. Everything was there. The small little envelope there below the ashtray is actually the sealed container of the cigarettes, of the cigarette butts from that night. I devised a tier area for our crime lab, for the state of Utah's crime lab, to design, and I put it in different areas. We then get together with the crime lab, and we state that we want DNA in 1 circle, and we would love DNA in number 3 circle, so we can tie in what we've got for the person that might have done this. I deliver all the evidence to on November 1st, 2023, all the evidence goes to the crime lab. Out of 29 items that you saw before, it balloons to around 84-ish items. After I categorize it and everything, the crime lab wants around 40 of those. They want around 40 of those. So I hand deliver them to the crime lab. May 21st happens, and the DNA results come back. The green circle is where Ann sat with that plastic cup, and she was smoking her cigarettes, which were Herbert Carrington's at the time. The red circle and the green, or I'm sorry, the red circle and the yellow circle as well that you can see there, we had never known who had sat there. Chief Dalton wanted to match the blood type with the cigarette smoked, and he could not do that because the FBI said we could not do that. However, the DNA from the cigarettes and the 2 camels that were there, Doug Chodamelka is the only one in the entire world that was sitting next to her that night. And his DNA is in those cigarette butts. And that's what we linked him to that seat. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean offhand that he was our guy. So they didn't have his DNA from the previous hair that was pulled from Melvin Dalton. Melvin Dalton said that he felt that he didn't do enough, but Melvin absolutely did enough. I'm sure he's listening to us now after he passed. But what Melvin's efforts was, at that point, he helped us out greatly with this. So the lab took part of the pants and did inside and outside swabs of the lab, or I'm sorry, inside and outside swabs of the pants as well. Ann's DNA obviously is on there because she's wearing the pants. However, it's got moderate support for inclusion for Doug on the inside and outside the waist of her pants. As you can see here, it says assumed number of contributors, and it shows 4. Ann is 1. Doug is strong or moderate support, and then the other 2 that you have seen there are what's called a low-level frequency or a low-level contributor of DNA. That low-level contributor would not have been enough to remove the pants. Most likely what it is it's our Office of Medical Examiners back in 1973 when they had to do what they had to do to put the evidence together. They brushed against or removed the pants, and that's what we've got there as an actual contributor. The pants that you can see here, they were white and blue, but when you're looking at the blue portion there, that is the inside of the pants. That is the inside of the pants. It's very, very important to recognize this because this would be brought up. This would be brought up in court if Doug was alive today. The pants, when they were removed, the right leg went inside out. The left leg did not. So when Ann is strangled with her pant leg, it's the inside of her pant leg. So if you're at a bar setting, we can brush against people. You can do transfer DNA. If your pants are inside out, it's impossible to have DNA on the inside. The swabs of the shirt as well on all of the buttons had Doug's DNA on all of the buttons of Doug. I'm sorry, all the buttons of the shirt had Doug's DNA on them. That's the shirt. The shirt was just a snap button shirt. And then the cuttings and the swabs of the inside of the pant leg that I was just talking about, where it's the inside of the pant leg. There are four contributors. Obviously, Ann is one of them, and very strong support for included is Doug K. Chodamelka. You can see that it says 4 there. The other 2 are so low level that the person most likely is the Office of Medical Examiners. When I asked the lab tech about the 4 contributors, she indicated that the only person that could have tied the knot at that point with the strong support that you got there with what was left behind, you have nighttime, sweaty hands, is going to be Doug Chodamelka. The other 2 contributors, I'm pretty certain, is the medical examiner's office while they removed the knot from her. The areas in red there is all of the areas where Doug's DNA was found on Ann's clothing that night after it was sent to the medical examiner's office, came back to the sheriff's department and stayed in storage for I think it was 50 years. I think it was 50 years, 9 months, and 12 days is when it was found. Like my notes said before, if Doug was still alive, he died in 2002, I would certainly ask for an arrest warrant to go to Fremont, Nebraska, and arrest Doug for this crime. There is enough probable cause at this point to charge him with the murder of Ann Woodward from March 2nd, 1973. We are still currently testing 2 other items as well. The lab has those. I have been informed by the lab that we will probably see results within the next 2 weeks or so. Doug's DNA will be entered in CODIS as well after this is done. I know Doug traveled extensively. He was brought here by the mine. He worked with the mine. I know for a fact that Doug has a criminal history in Alabama, California, Nebraska, and Iowa. There's other states that I know that he's been at, and those are the states on the bottom, which there's a good possibility that if he's done other crimes that nobody knows about and his DNA is in CODIS as an unknown, with this case, it will come forward as a known. Stephen.
My name is Stephen Stocks. I'm the Grand County Attorney. First, I want to thank law enforcement for their thorough investigation of this case, especially Detective Drexler. He has provided me an opportunity to review the evidence that you've seen today thoroughly. And based on his and my review, I strongly believe that there would be probable cause evidence to support a charge of murder against Doug. Unfortunately, he has passed. Had he not passed, we would have filed criminal information against him. We would have asked for an arrest warrant and an extradition. I hope today brings some closure to the family, because I truly believe that had this case been presented to a jury, he would have been found guilty beyond reasonable doubt for the murder of Ann Woodward. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming today. Jamison Wiggins, Grant County Sheriff. I would like to thank everybody for coming to this press conference. We're here today showing what interagency relationships can accomplish. This case would not be where it is today without the efforts from both the Moab Police Department and the Grant County Sheriff's Office. I want to highlight and give extra credit to Sheriff Bowman in 1973 for his crime scene evidence collection, and to the office for properly storing that for 51 years so it could be effectively used today. Also want to give another high praise to Detective Drexler from the Moab Police Department for his commitment and initiative in bringing attention and expertise to solving this case. I'd like to also thank, at the time, and later it became Sheriff Nyland. He was the detective on scene that day with the Moab Police Department, Chief Navarre, and my investigator Nathan Whitney for finding the evidence that was stored in our evidence room for 50 years. And to everybody else that played a role. We appreciate it.
You've thanked everybody for me. I just, on behalf of the Woodward family, I want to say thank you so much for caring enough to go and look for that. And thank you for both agencies for putting aside any history that prevented that collaborative effort. I think this closure has been a long time coming, and I just want to thank all of you that were involved. And if Bowman and Nell Dalton were here, I would thank them as well.
Annie Dalton, granddaughter of Ann Woodward. We are going to wrap this portion up. I wanted also to thank every law enforcement officer over 51 years who put their heart and soul into this case, and for none of them giving up on it, for the great work and forward thinking of past detectives and the chief of police and sheriffs that preserved items that at the time couldn't even be tested, but they somehow knew that someday that would be a piece of evidence that could break this case open. So pretty amazing that 51 years later, we're able to do this. I also hope now that we've identified Ann's killer, that the family, or at least the community, can maybe find some sense of closure. And I pray that it also gives Ann's family some peace at this time.